And that's an analogy of how we measure productivity. We measure only that which is easy to measure, bushels per acre. And what we don't measure in those diverse systems is all of that other production that used to go on in these smaller units, that you weren't just producing bushels of wheat per acre, you also had chickens, you also had some other gardening and other plants growing in concert with the wheat, etc. So you had all kinds of other production going on in these units rather than just the efficient one crop per acre. And of course, if you measure that, that's where the light is. That's easy to measure. And that's been the sort of argument for this system, is that it's highly efficient and highly productive, and we have many mouths to feed. But that's not where the keys are. Let me just shift gears here and ask, so what can we do? Because we all do have to eat many times a day, well, at least 3. I recommend 4. What do we do about it? What do we do about it? I mean, you can say to farmers, okay, you should all start farming organically. And that's, of course, as an organic farmer, when I talk to farmers, that's where I can go. But for us in this room, many of whom are not farmers, what do we do about it? And my beginning point is always find out something about what you're eating, and then care. Care what you eat. Care about what you eat. And that starts at home. If you're going to eat what you know, if you're going to know what you eat, you're going to have to start right at home. And it's a well-known slogan: think global, but eat local. So that's the first thing. And I'm very encouraged, actually, when I look at the data on that now. I'm very encouraged that a lot of people are, in fact, beginning to think more carefully about what they eat, and also to begin to eat locally, to eat what is to hand in their own neighborhoods. For one, it makes much better sense in terms of freshness and in terms of taste. But it also makes much better sense if you're thinking about greenhouse gas emissions, that the food you eat, the tomato you eat, was in fact grown nearby rather than in Mexico, because it didn't get from Mexico magically. It came there via transportation, and that's greenhouse gases. So that's the first thing. That's the obvious thing. Begin to eat that which is grown locally as much as you can. And then you always get this objection, oh, but we can't grow oranges in Saskatchewan. Right, you can't. But much of what, or we can't, you can't in Alberta either. There's no such Alberta advantage. But much of what we eat doesn't need to actually be exotic. In fact, we have become so used to the exotic that it has, in fact, declined in its exotic sort of aura. And we begin to eat that which comes from far away. In fact, we are eating that which comes from far away as if it isn't exotic anymore. So it's lost its edge anyway. So how about going back to eating that which is in season? Much more. Which means in the prairie region that you're eating a lot more root vegetables in wintertime. But in spring, you have then the very exotic, amazing experience of eating that which is then in season. I mean, if you look at those peasant agricultures and you look at our food cultures, and this is the other thing about eating in season, if you look at our food cultures where they evolved to be in season and appropriate to the geological and soil conditions and the climate conditions of the places where people lived and ate. And what is wrong with that? Do you think they ate worse than we do? Let me propose that they ate much, much healthier than we do. And that, in fact, it might have been, and just remembering my grandmother's food, let me say, I know it was tastier. So what would we be giving up by retaking our food system and localizing it again? We'd be giving up lettuce year-round, probably, unless we begin to talk about greenhouse production and so on and so forth, and there are many ways of doing that. But we might give up some of those, but what we might have back is, in fact, a much more delicious lunch. And a lunch that we could eat with a much freer conscience, too, which is also a consideration. So when I talk about reorienting the food system, I always start by saying, look, what can we do? How can we eat as individuals? How can we raise our consciousness about what we eat and begin to frequent the local farmers market and begin to do what we need to do in terms of our food as individuals? But it's not a system that was constructed by individual choice, neither by farmers nor by eaters, or often even not by whole groups of people. It isn't that we decided that we're going to move to a corporatized, globalized food system. Those are systemic changes, and in order to confront them, we are going to have to act together. It's a collective project as well as an individual project. And without a collective project, let me tell you that I don't think that we're going to manage to confront and change the food system, because there are powerful, powerful interests at work here. Some of the best, besides the oil and until recently the financial, but not so much now, corporate sectors are the agribusiness corporate sector. They are very profitable. So there is a huge push to continue to have this kind of a food system, because there's huge profits to be made. So an alternative doesn't come by just changing your own. It starts there, but it can't end by just changing your own food choices. It means that we start to act together, that we start to demand, that we start to confront what is being fed to us, literally. And I've always been a part of, all my adult life, a part of social movement, because, not that it's so much fun, although it is a lot of fun, but because I'm very committed to the view that, as a matter of fact, you can't make change unless you're prepared to cooperate, to act together, to change cultures, to change attitudes, to change ways of being, and we are in a social context. So I'm very committed to the view that we have to do this together and that we do this in movement. And I've been part of, as Mishka said in the introduction, part of the National Farmers Union, which is that sort of progressive farmer movement, small, voluntary, ragtag, but we do what we can to change how agriculture is, how policy is organized, and how agriculture is organized in this country. But a lot of what you eat, and this is when you go away and do your little assignment, you will find that a lot of what you eat, most of what you eat, isn't actually a Canadian product. So it's a global system. So we've become part of a global movement of small-scale farmers, indigenous peoples, and peasants, mainly peasants. And I myself would proudly like to be called a peasant. And if you think that that's an insult, think again. Why, in our language, peasant is a dismissive term? Because peasant actually means people of the land.